United Healthcare, Coalition of Texans with Disabilities, Raise Your Voice 2020 Advocate Connection Program. November 18th, 2020, Access to Medicines.
All right. Well, thank y'all. We were a little rusty. We didn't do one in the last week or two. But first, thank y'all for coming. It's good to see some of y'all's faces. It's been a long time since we've gotten to actually all be together and work on different issues. So thanks for joining us today. For those of you that don't know, my name is Chase Beard, and I'm the Deputy Director of CTD. My audio description is I'm a white male wearing a plaid shirt, sitting in our back bedroom, which has become my new office, and it's kind of nicer than the little closet I have at CTD. But just to kick us off, for some of you that don't know, CTD has been around since 1978. We're a disability advocacy organization, and we're among one of the primary advocacy groups working continually up at the legislature and trying to make sure that our members' voices are being heard. Two of our core principles in advocacy is always to involve you, our members, and those with lived experience, those who care for many of our members and our families, and the people that are living independent lives every day. And today, as we move forward, we're talking about Raise Your Voice. And so what does that mean? The idea behind this Raise Your Voice series we've been doing is to offer an opportunity for us to hear from you and to let you talk to us about the issues you're running into. Something that I know Laura and Dennis and I have talked about for a long time is when policy decisions are being made, sometimes they're being made in a vacuum, just like in Austin. And our members are across this state, and it's a very big state. And what's working for us, or what we see as an issue here in Austin, may not be an issue in El Paso or that little town out towards Marfa or out east. So we use this typically during a legislative year heading up to, we would be traveling around the state to meet with all of our stakeholders and to have input. And being able to convert to this virtual platform has allowed us to actually, I think, have more participation from those. And we've taken back from almost every one of these we've done something that needs to be worked on. So it's given us a lot of opportunities. As we move forward today, we're going to be talking about access to medication. I think this is something that CTD has been working on for a couple sessions now. It's, as I've always said, it's that easy take home of, if you're healthy, you can live your life. You can do the things you need to do. You can deal with all the other barriers, but you shouldn't be having to fight constantly for the things you need. So CTD is around to fight for those issues and to move forward. And today I'm going to introduce Dennis next, but I'm going to put a poll up, just a quick poll. Y'all can answer it while Dennis starts speaking. And I'm going to read it for those of you that may not be able to see the screen. And it says, have you, a family member or a close friend, had any trouble accessing medicines that were prescribed to you? So I'm going to launch that poll, and then I'm going to pass this off to Dennis, and we'll go from there.
Hey, thanks, Chase, and welcome everybody here. And by the way, if you're on a cell phone, you may, or something with a small screen, you may have to scroll down to hit the submit button on the poll. And I've now done that, and I hope you all have too. So my name is Dennis Borel. I'm the Executive Director here at the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities. I'm an Anglo man. I got a lot of gray going on. You know, I even got gray eyes, but gray hair, gray beard. I got a gray jacket on today. You know, I'm embracing the gray, as they say. And behind me is a visual of our building, our office building in downtown Austin. Office is a general term. It looks more like a barbecue joint, but we like it that way. I actually am sitting in there. Most of the time, we're all working from home these days, but I find doing these works well. So medication advocacy, it's kind of like what Trace was saying, and this is true whether you get your medications with help from Medicaid or Medicare, or whether you're using commercial insurance, whether you're getting some patient assistance program help, whether you're paying out of your pocket, wherever you're getting it, what we've learned that medication is valuable. It's especially valuable if you're a person with a permanent disability or a chronic condition. It's valuable for all of us when we need it. But again, people with disabilities and those with chronic conditions are the most impacted by having access to medications. So I've actually been here 20 years, not particularly in this office, in this chair, but 20 years at CTD. And initially, this really wasn't on our agenda of things to do. And this was probably, probably I'm thinking about 12 years ago, a friend invited me to go to see this committee meeting, attend a committee meeting. And they were going to describe which drugs would be made easily available to people on Medicaid and which ones would not. And today we would call that committee the Drug Utilization Review Board. But this was the first time I went. Again, it was probably about 12 years ago. And I went in there, and there was a committee of about 15 people, and there was about 25 people in the audience, which I thought was, pretty impressive for something I really had just only a slight knowledge of. And during the time, as I watched their deliberations, I realized, oh my God, this is so important. This is so important what they're doing, because it's really a very tiny percentage of these pharmaceutical medications end up on the preferred drug list, which is the easiest route to get it. I mean, you can get others, but they're very hard. There's a lot of paperwork. But the other takeaway I had is I was in there, and every member of that committee was either a physician or a pharmacist. And all the people those 25 so people were watching, there was doctors, there was pharmacists, there was pharmaceutical company representatives, there was insurance company representatives, and there was a bunch of hired gun lobbyists, some of the ones I recognized as among the most well compensated here in Austin. And there was exactly one person representing the Medicaid beneficiaries who this was all about, and that was me. And it was my first time over there. And I walked away and said, I've been missing out on an important advocacy thing. So since then, we've become pretty heavily engaged in getting access to medications. And we've done a lot of stuff. Chase mentioned a couple of years. It's really been about 5 or 6 sessions now we've worked on it. We've been involved on combating access problems like step therapy or non-medical switching. We had a big role in making the Hep C drugs, the drugs that cure hepatitis C, readily available to our Medicaid population. They weren't, even though they should have been. That was not a legislative issue. That was an agency issue. We've been involved in drug synchronization so that people can refill their medications at the same time rather than staggering them, which is a trick they were using to avoid medication limits. We're very heavily involved in opening access to biosimilars in Texas. And biosimilars are emerging types of medicines that are based on biological molecules instead of chemical compounds. And they're kind of like the generic version of biologics. In that Drug Utilization Review Board, well, at our initiative, we got some friendly legislatures to change the law in Texas and create a permanent slot on that board for someone to represent Medicaid beneficiaries, who is now speaks very forcefully on that board. I know that because I am that person. We also did stuff like right to try. I mean, people are facing very serious consequences. It's not really approved drug, give them a shot. We've been doing all these things and more. We have come to believe in this. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have 3 speakers, and you'll see there's a sequence of how the things they will address. And then we're going to some breakout rooms later, and we'll all get into small groups and discuss some of the things we've heard. So I have the honor of introducing our speakers. First one is Justin Hudman. Now, Justin's he's a friend of ours, and he is let's see, I've got his title here. Oh, yes, he is the senior manager for state government affairs with Amgen. But before then, he was a legislative staffer. That's how I first became acquainted with him in Representative Hunter's office. And Representative Hunter is a very influential member of the Texas House of Representatives. So with that, I will kick it to you, Justin.
Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate the invite on this. I was really excited when you gave me the chance to do this because I frankly love talking about this issue because it's just absolutely so important. And I should say, between my time being in Hunter's office and joining up with Amgen, I had the benefit of serving about 4 years with the Texas Pharmacy Association. So much of what I'm going to say today, I said thousands of times to pharmacists across the state of Texas, because your voice is so important. Having been a staffer, I was very blessed to work for Representative Hunter for nearly 6 years, kind of starting out as a legislative aide, moving up to running his office. And I can tell you, any given member, any given staffer are dealing with thousands of issues every single day. We have this strange concept in our lives that when we elect a member to office, both him and his staff, or her and her staff, are given the book of knowledge. And the fact of the matter is, they know pretty much nothing about everything. They have their niche areas with their profession that they may be very knowledgeable on, or some key areas that they've learned, but they really don't know so many things about so many issues. And I can tell you, when I was as a staffer, and kind of when I would have issues come up, I'd have 100 people coming at me with different issues, from transportation to healthcare to what you pick it, name it. It was an issue that we had to deal with. But the ones that really always mattered the most was when someone came in and shared a personal story and shared their message. I can tell you there are stories that I have in my mind today, and I won't share them here, just because some of them were so sensitive and they were so personal to these people that shared it with me, and it meant something to them. And that left me with an impression. That left me with stories and understandings that I wouldn't have had otherwise, because we as staffers and elected members, they don't live through all these issues. They have their life experiences, but they don't have the experiences you may have. And that's why it's so important to share your message, to share your story, to talk about the challenges you deal with. And in the healthcare space, I was very blessed for a time period that I helped my aunt, who actually worked with a Advocacy Inc. I know they've changed their name since, but it's a group that advocates on behalf of disabled folks. And when I went with her, she sat on the board. It gave me such a different perspective helping her get around, because she was in a wheelchair, that I don't see, that being able-bodied, I wasn't able to understand that. And having that experience with her really changed the things I started to recognize and started to change the things that I saw. And so when you're able to go into the Capitol and really share your personal story, that's giving them a better understanding. That's letting them know that these words on a paper, and I can tell you it's unfortunate, but it's the reality of the process that as a staffer and even as members, when you're working on policy issue, a lot of times you're just looking at those words. You're not always framing what those words mean in reality, because you don't have that context. You don't have that understanding, particularly if it's not in a space that you have to live in, to know, well, if I do this, this means this for folks. And that's such a challenge. I mean, as a staffer and as members, not having full context or understanding makes policies more difficult. And that's where we often get, and you'll see where, and I see a lot of my colleagues on here, and they can all attest to it, where you pass a bill, and then all of a sudden, once it goes into effect, you start better understanding the impact of that bill, and where people have had to deal with where the words didn't make sense, or where you create a loophole or a challenge in the legislation that leave people left behind, and then you have to go back and clean it up. And so when you can be a voice for yourself, and you've got great folks with Dennis and with Chase, they are amazing. They are top notch. They do a great job representing y'all's issues in the Capitol. But at the end of the day, they need you. They are only as strong as their membership and as y'all coming in and sharing those personal stories, what matters to you. And for me, I thought it'd be nice to share with y'all just one of the times when I was with TPA with a pharmacist, that we were working on an issue. And it was such a simple issue, but it's surprising how many folks actually did oppose it at the time. But prior to passage of legislation, pharmacists in Texas could not administer epinephrine in an emergency unless you had a prescription for it. So if you walked into the pharmacy and you were in anaphylactic shock, they couldn't do nothing to help you if you did not have a prescription. So we passed a law to change that. And do you know what really sold that story was when our president at the time got on the diet or the testimony and shared her personal story about her son and her husband going out of town. They were in a county away from their normal residence, and her son had a peanut allergy. Well, of course, they went with their friends, and his friend handed him a candy bar which had a peanut in it. He immediately went into anaphylactic shock. The dad did not have the epinephrine with them, had no idea where the hospital was. All he did was jump in the car and drive. I mean, and I think we can all envision ourselves in a role of what would you do in an emergency? And in part, he was panicked, and he ended up walking his limp son, who was already turning blue, into a pharmacy, where the pharmacist did the right thing, took the product off the shelf and administered it, saved her son's life. And I can tell you, when I watched her share that story, I watched the senators and I watched the House members in both committees think about it. They immediately turned into their own heads and went, what would I want done? If that was my kid, or if I was in that situation, what would I want done? And it was such a great story to share. It was something that really impacted those members, and it left them with an understanding of how this policy really can impact people. And after that, I mean, it's become such a great thing. We've had numerous cases where folks have gone in after the fact of the law passing and know that that's an option. And so for me, that's just such a good, and it was such an impactful story that it made the difference. I really believe without that story, we may not have gotten that bill passed. But that gives you the idea of how your story, your life experiences, whether you're someone suffering from disabilities or you're someone that works with someone with disabilities, those stories matter. And those members and those elected officials and the staff, they need to hear those stories. They need to know about, in this case, medications, that if they make it more difficult to access your medications, what does that mean to your life? I know there's been times of talking about reducing the amount of prescriptions that can be filled. Well, if you're someone that has a difficulty getting to the pharmacy, what does that mean if they're now suggesting 1, 2, or 3 trips to get to the pharmacy versus 1? That's why your story matters. Your information is so critical and so important. And for me as a staffer, like I said, when I had the privilege to serve with Representative Hunter, to work with him, I mean, there's stories that will live with me until I'm hopefully in my late 90s that I will still remember vividly because they impacted me. They really made a difference, and they made me want to work harder on that bill. They made me want to go ahead and go, you know, I've got that stack over here of 100 things and they're all important, but you know, this one, I want to get this one done. This matters. This is important. And so for me, I mean, I can never express enough what you being an advocate for yourself really means. And I think it's fair to say that Dennis and Chase, as amazing as they are, they need you with that too. They need your stories. They need your information to be able to help drive that message, drive that understanding with elected officials. But I think I'm close to my time. I didn't want to go over, so happy to answer questions in the breakouts.
Thanks, Justin. That was really well said. And by the way, I noticed that there's a few other former legislative staffers on our call, and I saw them nodding while you were talking. I think they remembered those stories. So Chase, before we go down to Grant, do you have a result on that poll we took?
Yeah, and I'll share that real quick. So 81% of the people that took the poll have run into some kind of barrier in access to medications. And I don't think any of us on this call are surprised. This is something that we've been working on for a long time. And getting the right medication at the right time is the best policy. So we'll continue working on that, but it just shows that this is a growing issue, and Dennis's dog is barking.
Yes. Yes, my dog is barking. Sorry about that, but you know, welcome to Zoom these days. Hey, come here, boy. Okay. So before I introduce Grant, I will remind Grant and then And then you, Kristen, that we do audio description of speakers. And why we do that is we do have people who really can't see or image that are part of this. And so audio description is a technique in the disability community to let people know what you look like so they can visualize you. And you've heard some of us do that. So our next speaker, Grant Cale, he's with the Department of U.S. Policy and State Government Affairs for Bristol Myers-Squibb, calling in from Illinois. So Grant, you're up.
All right. Hey, thank you, Dennis. And yeah, before I do a screen share, I will just describe myself: white male, peppery gray hair, have a black chair I'm sitting in, white shirts, and sitting in the basement of my office or my home here in Geneva, Illinois. So with the Keith Richards sign in the picture in the background backdrop. So it is a pleasure. Allison, I see some thumbs up, so it's a pleasure seeing some really friendly faces. I'm honored to be part of the Texas team. Dennis and Laura and Chase, thanks for allowing me to be part of this call, and look forward to hopefully meeting everybody in person one of these days. So like Dennis did say, I'm Grant Cale with Bristol Myers-Squibb. I do the alliances for BMS. I know I've worked with a few of you over the country. I'm based out of Illinois, like Dennis mentioned, and I cover 14 states, working with third-party organizations like yourself. And Justin was spot on when he talked about the importance of the patient voice and the provider voice. That's how every legislation I've seen ever get passed is because of the voice there. And Dennis, also, I loved your story about the P&T committees, because over the years of work in P&T, and I wish every P&T had a patient voice or a provider, really a specific patient voice on the P&T committee. So well said there. I wish that could be a best practice at every Medicaid at the state level. So hopefully BMS hasn't done a really good job teaching us IT yet. So hopefully I could share my screen that I have here. Can everybody see the screen? Thumbs up, Dennis or Justin, I see you. But excellent. So thanks again. And also my colleague, I see him in the backdrop there, Jesse Lewis. It's always a pleasure. At least I always have good things to say about him, but hopefully everybody else does at the same time. So he's been great to learn from and working with, over the years that I've been with Bristol Myers-Squibb. So what I'd like to do is kind of share a little bit about BMS, what we do, and talk about, some of the disease states that we're in, and then, finish off with hopefully a short video if it works on CAR T therapy, a very novel, innovative approach. So let me start off with a little bit, how proud we are with the accomplishments that not only just BMS has made, but the industry has made in a number of different disease states. If you look at the cancer therapies that we have available both in solid tumor and hematology, you look at the cardiovascular opportunities we have and also immunology, it's pretty significant. One thing I do want to share, your voice, the patient voice, the provider voice has actually been very influential in bringing these new drugs to market, especially when you look at the HIV community, the Hep C community, the mental health community. So a lot of these, innovative medicines have been, brought to market because of the voice of the patient. So in regards to BMS, we're very proud of these accomplishments we have here in the cancer space. We probably has more experience in immuno-oncology than most, of our colleagues out there. IO therapy in particular, it's where we, harness our own immune system to fight the cancer cells. We have more than 250,000 patients treated with IO specifically for lung cancer or melanoma, and this certainly has been a game changer. Cancer or these IO therapies change their survival expectations for cancer. BMS has also been a leader with blood cancers, hematology agents out there. In particular, CAR T, which I'll get a little bit, I'll show this, hopefully this 101 video on CAR T therapy. but it's basically taking the patient's own T cells. We re-engineer the T cells, or I should say engineers re-engineer the T cells to basically hunt down and attack the cancer cell of the patient. So truly revolutionary, very precision medicine-like. And right now we have, as a company, we have quite a few assets in clinical trials. And we're hoping over the next 2 to 3 months, we'll have 2 new agents approved within or pending FDA approval over the next 3 to 4 months. And as a matter of fact, Texas, the MD Anderson does quite a bit of work with BMS with our 8 trials that we have at MD Anderson. Also cardiovascular disease. Since 1921, cardiovascular disease has been the #1 killer here in the U.S. for leading cause of death here in the U.S. BMS, we've been in the cardiovascular space for over 60 years. Most recently, we have a best-in-class anticoagulant, a drug indicated for AFib and deep vein thrombosis, which currently has been used in over 10 million patients worldwide. And we continue to expand our cardiovascular space, and more to come. We just bought a new company that specifically looks at heart failure medications. That we just signed everything. I think this week is when was our day one with this new company that we just bought for cardiovascular in the cardiovascular space there. Over 20 years, we've been in the immunology space. Earlier this year, we had our first drug approved for adults for relapsed multiple sclerosis. And also we are in the very crowded autoimmune disease space with a drug called Orencia. Our clinical development there right now is looking at biomarker approach to treating RA. So we believe I think we're the first medicine for RA, rheumatoid arthritis, that's demonstrated evidence in biomarker guided approach. So we also know, the complexity, and hopefully you all know the complexity, how long it takes a drug to get to markets, the process that it takes, and how costly it is. There's no guarantee of a drug coming to market. But right now we have over 50 compounds in development in these 3 areas of that we work in, along with fibrotic disease and neuroscience. We're expanding our clinical development program. And so right now we're looking at about 40 different diseases studied broadly. Also, Justin and Dennis talked about the importance of the voice, the patient, and to ensure we have the access to these medications. So BMS is a company, and I know many of my industry colleagues support the same thing, ensuring patient affordability. We support solutions to keep medications affordable to patients, and that they're aligned to the insurance benefit that the patient does have. So we understand, we certainly know cost sharing has gone up through either co-insurance or co-pays, and which decreases adherence rates. So we certainly support those policies to support affordability. Your organization did some phenomenal work with SB 680, the Step Therapy for Reform bill that passed back in 2017. I don't have to preach into the choir here, but this now law has been passed in over 24 states, providing common sense guardrails protecting patients from harmful effects of step therapy. And I still think, I know Jesse and I, talk about this all the time, with step therapy. I still think Texas has probably one of the strongest laws out there. So, well done to you all with those important provisions. The last area I just want to kind of focus real quick on is CAR T therapy. This is a game changer. It's cutting edge from a medical science standpoint, from a technology standpoint, and it is paving the new way to treat cancer. And like I mentioned before, CAR T therapy is specifically designed for the patient by removing those T cells, re-engineering those T cells, and it's extraordinary what these engineers can do here to chase down and kill those cancer cells. So right now there's about 400 clinical trials underway in CAR T, both in blood cancers and also solid tumor cancers. So, and unlike tradition, or the other thing I did want to guess another policy, a huge win for providers and patients is for CAR T therapy. As CMS over the summer, moved to create a new DRG specific to CAR T. And I think some of the faces I saw on the screen here, some of you were involved in this, providing comments to CMS. So this allows a higher base rate for CAR T. So a great win for patients and a great win for providers, who will be writing or using CAR T therapy. So lastly, unlike traditional molecules, the small molecule and also biologic medications which are used for broad usage, CAR T therapies pretty much are individualized. It's a one batch, one patient methodology. So hopefully I could share this video if it comes through to give you, it's about 2.5 minutes. Tell you a little bit about CAR T therapy.
Advances in cutting-edge medical science and technology are paving the way for the next generation of potential cancer treatments and the realization of personalized medicine, such as chimeric antigen receptor T-cell or CAR T therapy. Unlike traditional small molecule or biologic manufacturing, which are intended to broadly treat many patients with specific diseases, CAR T therapies are specifically manufactured for each individual patient. They are produced by removing T cells and modifying them to bind to a specific targeted protein. The targeted protein can be found on both cancerous and normal cells. Because of the individualized one patient, one batch methodology, CAR T therapies are logistically challenging and scientifically complex. Let's take a closer look at how the process works. First, the patient's white blood cells, which fight infections in the body, are removed from the patient's blood through a process called leukapheresis or apheresis. Then, the cells are shipped to a specialty manufacturing site, where the T cells are isolated and genetically engineered to bind to a specific targeted protein, which can be found on both cancerous and normal cells. These CAR T cells are created through a complex multi-step process. The CAR T expressing engineered cells are then multiplied in the lab to generate the number of the cells needed for a dose. Given the tailored and individualized approach, the manufacturing process can take several weeks and requires close coordination between manufacturer and healthcare team. Once the CAR T cells are manufactured, they are cryopreserved and shipped back to the patient's treatment center. Before receiving treatment with CAR T cells, patients are usually prepared with low-dose chemotherapy. Once infused, the CAR T cells may multiply and attack cells expressing the particular targeted antigen, including cancer cells. Following infusion, patients are routinely monitored for possible side effects, which may be severe or even cause death. Scientists have long been excited about the prospects of personalized medicine, and CAR T-cell therapies have the potential to represent a true paradigm shift in the treatment of certain cancers. It will take a continued collaboration by researchers, health systems, drug manufacturers, policymakers, and patients to ensure that our healthcare system continues to support the development and access for these personalized treatments for patients today and for the future.
All right, well, thank you for allowing us to share that. Hopefully it gave you little insights on CAR T, but it will be a game changer, and it's already made huge significance in the couple that are currently available out there. So it's a pleasure. Thanks for allowing us to give you a snapshot of BMS and the industry, and look forward to hopefully meeting everybody in person soon.
Hey, thank you very much, Grant. So, that I'm kind of blown away by that, as someone who lost my mother earlier than I wanted to lose her to cancer. I wish she'd have been doing this some decades back, but more power to you. I think, one of the things where we're putting this, thinking about how to work this together, this is about encouraging self-advocacy, which is why we had Justin launch into the value from a staffer with a particularly pharmaceutical background to talk about self-advocates and how they matter. And then we definitely wanted to have like Grant come in and talk about like when you support stuff that keeps pharmaceutical stuff, it kind of almost returns back to you in the development of new and better medicines. And this is an important thing that we want more of. We want you guys to find solutions. We want you guys to find cures. And that takes us in sequence to our third speaker, Kristen Crawford with the Arthritis Foundation. She is the advocacy director there. And as you shall see in her talk now, she's bringing it back to a specific legislative issue that's going to occur in the Texas legislative session that's coming right up. So Kristen, I'll remind you to audio describe yourself, as is our practice here, and please join us.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm hopeful that you all can hear me Wonderful. I know some of you that are joining us today, and it's so good to see your faces. For the rest of you, my name is Kristen Crawford. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, but a fun fact about me, I was actually born in Del Rio, Texas, many, many years ago. I am an African-American woman. I have curly, dark brown / black hair. I'm wearing a pink dress with leopard earrings. This is probably one of the first times that I've dressed myself up during quarantine. So it feels good to have a reason to be able to get dressed up with all of you. I'm really excited to share with you for a few minutes about a policy issue that I think is important to many, many people, regardless of which disease you're living with. I think that this is important just even beyond the arthritis community. This is an important issue for everyone. And so I will go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully this will work. Okay. Back up here. So as I said, I'm Kristen Crawford, the Advocacy Director for the Arthritis Foundation. And today we're talking about accumulator adjustment programs. You may hear them around the industry called AAP, just a abbreviated version of accumulator adjustment programs. But at a high level, this is a program that insurance companies will use to basically say that if a patient pays for their medications using a third-party payment, which includes a copay assistance program, a manufacturer's coupon, whatever it may be, that insurer sometimes will not allow for that payment to be applied towards the patient's out-of-pocket costs or towards their deductible. And I think that we all can agree, for people that are living with chronic health issues, that are already dealing with high cost medication, this is a really serious issue. And thinking about where we are with this pandemic this year, and people that have lost their jobs, they're losing, they're worried about paying for their light bills or keeping a roof over their heads. The last thing that they should be worried about is whether or not they can afford their medication. A really good friend of mine who's on the call with us today, I know that she would want me to explain this issue in this way. If you have a close relative who decides to do a wonderful thing for you and to pay your mortgage for you for 1 month, your mortgage company would not go back to you and say, unfortunately, we cannot accept that payment. We cannot apply it towards your mortgage payments because it's being paid for by someone else that is not you. Your mortgage company would gladly accept that money, because as long as it's going to pay for your home, the money is good. We believe that the same thing should apply for a patient's medication. And what I have here, insurance companies should not be allowed to double dip by taking the funds from the copay assistance and from the patient. If I pay for my medication using my copay assistance program or any other third-party payment, it should be allowed to be applied towards my out-of-pocket costs and my deductible. Accumulator adjustment programs have become so popular among employers over the past few years. We're seeing that in one recent employer survey, 54% of respondents did not credit third-party copay assistance towards their patients' deductibles. And so the next slide that I show, I'm going to give you a look at an example of an accumulator adjustment program clause in an insurance benefit. So here, one of the important things to remember, I don't need you to really understand the words that are written here because of course it could look different for every health plan. But one of the most important things to remember is that this language can be buried within your health plan. It's a lot to review as you're going through your health plan each year. And if a patient, which many do, if they happen to miss this, and they run out of funds within their copay assistance program, they're stuck with having to pay for their medications, and the payments may not be applied towards their deductible or out-of-pocket costs. And so here's a look at what we're doing in Texas for the next legislative session. And this is not just the Arthritis Foundation. We're working with many other patient and provider groups and other industry partners to work on introducing bill language that will allow all third-party payments to be applied towards a patient's deductible and out-of-pocket costs. Previously, this language has been introduced and passed in states like Virginia, West Virginia, Illinois, Arizona, and Georgia. And I think one of the important things to remember here is if you happen to be working on this legislative issue with us next year, legislators love to hear about what other states are doing. And it's really important to mention states that may politically align with your state. So in Texas, for instance, you may want to mention that Georgia or Arizona or West Virginia have passed this legislation. Sorry about that. So we are also working on this issue at a federal level. One thing that I did not mention, but it's really important to remember that the Texas bill that we're working on for next session will apply to state regulated healthcare plans. The federal bill that we're working on will apply to ERISA protected health plans. The federal bill is very similar to this language. We'll see what happens next year. I cannot definitively say that it will pass the next Congress, but we are working simultaneously at the state level and at the federal level. And then finally, one of the things that you can do to help us out with this effort in Texas is if you have a story or if you have someone close to you that has experienced an accumulator adjustment program and not being able to apply their third-party co-payments towards their deductible or out-of-pocket costs, please consider sharing that information either with me or with Dennis and CTD or whatever organization you're affiliated with. I believe that we have said already on this call today that, all of us that work for these organizations, we can go into the legislator's office and try to tell your story, but it's much more meaningful if it comes from the patient themselves and if we have a real story to tell. And so if that is you, if you would like to become involved with the effort, I certainly would appreciate your support. I know that the other organizations that are on the call would as well. So I'm looking forward to answering any questions in the breakout rooms or hearing your personal stories, but this will certainly be a collaborative effort. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Kristen. So, you know what, I hear this, when this was first brought to us, Chase and I were kicking this back and we're like going, so wait a minute, what this ultimately means is that you have a copay or deductible and you access patient assistance programs, which are big in the United States, big, huge. Sometimes they're in coupons, sometimes they pay it directly, whatever. And the idea is to make access to drugs for people who can't come up with the copay or have problems. So the insurer gets the funds, they don't give you any credit for getting the funds. They'll still keep your same level of unpaid deductible or copay. And we were listening to this going like, this seems a little, basically not a fair shake, you know, to put it in layman's terms, just not a fair shake. We will look forward to working on this with you, Kristen, and other folks, and talk more about this as time goes on. As I said, patient assistance is very, very common in the United States, and it helps a lot of people, but it's not supposed to leave you with it kind of a debt at the end of the day. You know, the idea is it's supposed to help you get the medicines you need. So Chase, if you'll describe what we're going to do about breakouts, I'll leave a prompting question before we start the breakout rooms.
Following small group discussions.
This was really interesting. And so there's a chat function at the bottom, and you can go in there and click on and maybe put a comment in there. So, you know, like in our group, you know, one of the things that, you know, Jim mentioned sometimes you're in a situation where you pay the light bill or you pay for the prescription. And if you have a copay that you thought was covered and then you have to pay it again, then you're put into that situation. So I'm going to put in that. So go ahead and put in your comments in the chat, and I'll put in mine. Pay light bill or pay the RX.
And for those of you that might not be able to enter into the chat box right now, we'll send a follow-up email where you can also kind of respond and give us the information that you want us to have and that we can work with. And that'll come directly after the event.
I want to thank you all for your time today. I think we kind of start with large views and narrowed it down to a really specific topic. And we're also talking in our breakouts that the optics of this is terrible, you know, and sometimes bad optics can help you pass good bills, you know. So we don't do this alone. We have a lot of partners that provide us financial support. No one has ever paid to join us on one of these calls, and we've done quite a few of them now. And, you know, so we don't charge copays to people who look at our Raise Your Voice options here. So how do we do this? Well, let me tell you how and who's helped us out. So at our entry level to silver letter sponsors, Surterra, Texas, Bristol Myers-Squibb, Molina Healthcare, CareSource, Shield Healthcare, and MCNA Dental. Up on the next level, supporters of gold level DentaQuest partnership, AstraZeneca, Amgen. By the way, you may pick up that some representatives of some of these companies who joined us today are sponsors. And onto the diamond level, Amerigroup, CDS in Texas, Pharma, Superior Health Plan, and our top level sponsors, United Healthcare and Heart InterCivic. So without those folks, we wouldn't be able to do this, and we appreciate each and every one of them. And we appreciate each and every one of you for spending an hour with us today and get educated. Be assured if you're continuing to stay plugged into us, and we hope you do, it won't be the last you hear of copay accumulators. Thank you very much. Any last words from